40 years. Many of us knew him from there first, and just passed away recently. And just think it's very appropriate if we take a moment and have a moment of silence in respect to his service and commitment to our community. Would the magistrate like to make any comment? So if you all would join me, I would appreciate it. Thank you. So just to lay out today's presentations that we have Michael, George, and Keith back from Compass, and they're going to give an overview of the additional scenarios that we have wanted to look at for our long-term financial planning and discussion, and just it's really tied to our next step. We've got our budget into DLG, waiting for feedback from them, and that's very positive. But this document, we just really felt like it was wise to put together and have a comprehensive, holistic look at expenditures and revenue, looking down the line, 5 years plus out, and then, as we discussed in this budget process, looking at and everybody reminded myself to turn my microphone on. But as we went through this budget process, it's evident that it's probably wise that this fall we put together a team and looking at another capital improvements plan and try to lay out what are priorities and what are wants and what are needs, and I think that's very wise to do. Again, I think the way we went about our business the last time was very productive. I think it was help set the priorities of the new EMS station, the sheriff's office and clerk's annex, and apparatus at the road department, right. Apparatus at the fire department. So, I think doing that type of work intentionally is very, very productive. But the data that Michael's going to go over right now is part of the scenarios that you all wanted to look at, and just additional information, more information, better decisions we make, I think. So, Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Judge. We appreciate you all inviting us back, and I appreciate all the feedback that you all provided in terms of the different scenarios that you all wanted to look at, as well as the information that we got from Michelle and Judge Covington and Jeff on kind of the budget side. And so what we prepared for you all today was just really an update to the last presentation with the changes that were requested. And so we kind of broke this down into really 4 different 5-year pro formas to look at. And so the first pro forma that we have for you all is what we have kind of referred to as the base model, which is essentially where you all are at today. And the big change between what we presented last month and this month is that this reflects some of the staffing changes, I think, that were incorporated into your all's budget and were a part of the conversations that we had with staff. And so this first scenario, this base model scenario, reflects some additional EMTs, 3 new bailiffs, a new HR specialist, and a paramedic training specialist. And so if you look under that base model option, under the expenditures, under new employees, it's highlighted in orange, you can see where we've started to layer in the expense of those new employees. And so just looking at this from a base model perspective, not including any additional capital needs, you all can see on this base model that from a fund balance perspective, that this produces a positive outcome. So, adding in these additional staff, it looks like you all can cover this pretty easily. And so you can see down at the very bottom of the page where we show your targeted fund balance, you'll see it increasing each year based on this scenario. And so this is, again, kind of where you all sit today. And then the second part of this kind of base model is the second page we provided, which kind of piggybacks off some of the comments and questions that Chad had at the last meeting, which was, how much cash do we have available to cash fund projects on a pay-as-you-go basis, really under the base model. And so the differences between the first base scenario we provided and the second, page 2, this base model plus PAYGO, is that you'll see we've assumed that you all would cash fund starting in 2028 about $1.5 million per year in projects. And so essentially, Chad, to answer your question, based on where you are at today, you all have about $1.5 million a year in cash that you can support for pay-as-you-go projects and still stay above that fund balance threshold of 30%.
So my question is this. The county has potentially, maybe in the next calendar year, maybe in the next fiscal year, some properties that we were probably looking to surplus. So do you have a recommendation? I have no idea what that number would be, but let's just say it's between $500,000 and $1 million. I don't know. Let's just say $500,000. Do you recommend us paying toward debt service, or would you recommend us putting that in some interest-bearing account that we could add toward our additional construction cost of new capital projects?
So as it sits today, our recommendation would be if you have that additional money coming in, that you either invest it, put it in your investment accounts, or you apply it towards projects, because the current interest rates are higher than the interest rates on your existing debt service. And so with that, assuming that's still the case next year, it would make more financial sense to invest it or apply it towards projects because those rates are higher than existing.
That's what I was expecting, hoping you to say that, but I just wanted you to say that so we could all hear. Okay.
And so I guess I wanted to start, Judge, at the kind of the base level and see if you all have any questions on the base models and then the pay-as-you-go before we get into some of these additional scenarios.
I have no additional questions. Anyone else?
Okay. So the other two scenarios we provided, which we list as scenario 1, which is the third option, and scenario 2, which is the fourth option. These, I think, go specifically, Ryan, to address some of the questions you had on additional staffing and the impact. And so we've talked to Jeff and Michelle and Judge Covington on some of those thoughts on additional staffing going forward and what that may be in a few years. And so scenario 1 that we've provided, the third option for you all, is essentially that base model with 3 additional EMTs added, 3 additional paramedics added, and the cash purchase of a new ambulance. And so if you look at the scenario 1 option, you can see that we've layered in under the new employees. We've layered in those additional staffing expenses, and we've also layered in a pay-as-you-go capital expense for that ambulance. And so under this scenario, I think the important thing to look at, again, is down at the bottom is that target fund balance. And you'll see that even with these additional staffing changes and assuming the purchase of the ambulance, that you all are still above that 30% fund balance threshold. And so if we look out 5 years, 4 or 5 years in 2030 or 2031, we're projecting your balance as a percentage of expenditures at almost 35 and 34% respectively. And so that doesn't include any additional capital above the ambulances, but assuming that to be the case, it does, and based on the current trajectory of your revenues, seem feasible from a fund balance perspective. And then the final scenario that we wanted to discuss was really almost kind of like the all-in scenario, which is really adding all of the potential staffing needs that have been contemplated. And so scenario 2, which is the final option we're showing you all, is essentially that scenario one option with the 3 additional EMTs, paramedics, and ambulance, and then adding on top of that a new fire station that would be bonded, as well as 12 additional firefighters. And so obviously this would be a huge increase in terms of operating expenses, adding that many staff as well as the debt load, but we did want to show you all that kind of option from a planning perspective. And so if you all look at scenario 2, you can see under new employees, under expenditures, a pretty drastic increase starting in 28, attributed to the additional fire staff. And then you'll see under the other financing sources and uses, kind of towards the bottom, in 2029, this transfer to the capital improvement funds, that would represent the debt service on that $5 million fire station. And so the big takeaway here is if you look at your fund balance here, you'll see that additional staff load from all of those positions will start to strain your budget absent any new revenues, and you start dipping below that 30% threshold. And so absent any new revenues, that will start to stress the operating side of your budget. And so I'll stop there. I guess before I ask questions, Keith, I want to make sure Keith's been working really hard on the nuts and bolts of this. Did I miss anything in terms of the analysis?
No, I think that's basically kind of how we try to put it together to kind of illustrate the differences based on which direction you all move forward.
Questions?
So,
I think it lays it out like it lays it out pretty plainly. And there's always variables on the revenue side, and then there's always unexpected expenditures that we have to kind of project out as well. Kelly Corman.
well, in any of these scenarios, we don't have bonding out for any of the new ball fields we've talked about, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So in this
probably,
last,
not to interrupt you, but we probably ought to add that one other item. Like,
well, I know these numbers on scenario 2 won't be exact because the salary, we put the increase for the firefighters, but the $5 million for the fields might be close.
I think that's a fair number. I think we've been using $5 million.
That's what we'd share in the, whatever. But so, yeah, not to add additional work, but I know if you took those salaries out and just put the bond, the debt service in there, what that would look like. But sorry I didn't ask that sooner, but.
No problem.
And that's, I really appreciate that question. And I was sitting here thinking the same thing myself, like we should have added that in as one additional scenario. But let me ask you this. So we go through the process and make a decision on which direction and timing we want to go on potential quality of life project like youth baseball, youth softball, additional fields. We say we wanted to start that project in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year and try to bridge it into 2 budgets. Mm-hmm. I think that's always wise. I think you would agree with that. But help me. The funding options that we would have, if you wanted to bond, let's just say $5 million, and the timing, could you give us a little,
Sure.
Just the timeline, what that would look like?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So on the bonding side, the biggest hurdle you all have, whether or not you issue bonds in the capital market or even just take out a loan with the bank, anytime a county borrows over $500,000, you're going to have to go through the DLG approval process. And so that adds time to the process itself. But I would just say big picture, if you all just came to us and tomorrow said we want to borrow money for XYZ, I would look at about a 90 to 100-day process to get funds. It takes typically a couple months to get through the DLG process. We can knock some of the other approvals out during that time period, but it's typically a 90 to 100-day process from start to finish to get funds. But you can start that process, get approval, and then decide later to not go forward with the project or to pay cash for it. and it's no harm, no foul. And so if you all are anticipating needing money, the good thing about the process is that you can get the approval, but it doesn't bind you to the transaction. It just gets that process out of the way.
Everybody good on that? Any other questions? Ryan?
You can, sorry, real quick, I want to add to that, sorry, Ryan.
you're good.
You can also reimburse yourself for prior capital expenses as well. And so if you all want to go forward with ball fields, for example, and let's say you all want to pay cash for it, there is a mechanism in which if you all decide maybe towards the end of the construction process that maybe we didn't really want to put all this cash in, we wanted to borrow. There's a mechanism where you can come back in and issue bonds to fund the project and then reimburse yourself for any capital expenses that you all have incurred along the way. And so there is that option as well as you all work through these projects, is that you can make a decision to reimburse yourself after the project start, if that's the intent of the court.
Ryan?
Well, I was just gonna, I mean, none of, like, currently, the way these all look, even without the 5 million, do you think that we stay above the 30% threshold in any of these scenarios if we bond 5 million? Like, I don't see any of these where we would stay above that currently. And I know the base model doesn't really play that out that, well, I mean, we didn't ask you to, so, but all the rest of them, just generally looking at them, I don't know how we would stay above the 30%. I mean, in the scenario 2, we dropped below 30% already, and that's not bonding anything. Well, I guess bonding the fire station.
I think if you bonded 5 million and didn't use any cash, I think we stay above the 30% threshold.
You would. The real drag on scenario 2, where you go under the 30%, is on the staffing side, where you jump from 1 million to 3 million. And so if you all were to bond, let's say $5 million, we would structure the bond payments so that they wouldn't be as much in the front next 3 or 4 fiscal years, and then when your other debt falls off, that's when the payments would ramp up. So you would have kind of level payments. And so it would not have a huge impact the next 5 years if you bonded, just because we could stretch those payments out and wrap them around your existing debt. So you would stay above the 30% threshold if you all did bond for those projects.
I'll ask Michael to prepare that one and
Sure.
show us that additionally. But
Can we get the numbers from Branstad Carroll? Because I thought it was like 8 to 10, wasn't it?
what we've looked at is if you built a $6 million baseball, softball youth complex and the swimming pool was 4, then the conversation has been that the city and the county would split that 10 million, and we'd get, let's look at a target of that 5 million. That's been the conversation. None of that's finalized. It's just a conversation about looking at those projects that have been identified. But I think this is, it's on paper. It shows us where we are in expenditures and on revenue, and then as we look at those scenarios, you can see how it plays out over time and where we would stand. And adding those additional firefighters would put a stress on our 30% threshold. But we can continue to look at this and talk, and then the one thing that's been done in other places and here in the city is they've applied for a SAFER grant that pays for 3, but then after 3 years, it's all on top of you. You can't get away from it. You can push it out, but like if you push it out, would that 3 years give you the time for your revenues to grow? But at the same time, your costs for wages and benefits are going to grow too. So that that's something that we can look at as well. But that's an application process. It's highly competitive, and
There's a lot of details in that SAFER grant that we
Yeah.
need to consider.
no. Any comments from anyone else? And Michael and Keith, thank you, and I'll be back in touch, and we'll iron out just a couple more things.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, if, you all do think that the capital projects you are looking at in the next, say, 3 to 4 years is, let's say, 5 to 7 million, based on what we're seeing now, the most efficient way to do that is probably going to be a mix of debt and cash. Because if you all do get some of the industrial growth that may come in the next few years, that's going to spin off some money in the occupational license tax during the construction process. And so that'll allow you all to cash fund a lot of that. And so, 1.5 million was the pay-go amount per year. And so if you all have, let's say, 5 to 7 in the next few years, you could conceivably do some sort of like 50-50 mix, or, some percentage where you're using the extra cash coming in, but you're also borrowing so you don't get below that 30%. And so I think there's a good balance there. It just depends on the project amount, and it depends on these other revenues coming in.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Keith. Much appreciated. We'll now transition over. Holden Fleming and his team are here from Planning and Zoning, and they have forwarded the record from the Planning Commission on accessory dwelling unit and then cluster developments. And I thought it would be wise just to have Holden come and give an overview of what was forwarded to us, and then talk about next steps with the court. And part of those next steps, of course, would be to get public comment and information on it. So I'll have Holden do the presentation, then you all can answer any questions, and then I'll allow anyone from our audience that might want to make a comment or ask questions to do so at that time.
Thank you. I'll try to be fairly brief for this morning's presentation. As we get started, I just want to clarify these are two different text amendments. One is for the accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and the other is an update to our cluster development regulations. The ADUs are in some ways very similar to how we currently handle secondary dwelling or secondary residence permits as a conditional use permit. Cluster developments, like I said, are just a continuation of an existing regulation. So if we'll go to the next slide there. In a moment. As we're pulling that back up, one of the things I hope that we'll keep in mind today is the understanding that a lot of times when it comes to writing an effective ordinance, what we're really looking for is the usability of that ordinance, both by staff, who oftentimes live in that document day in and day out, but also by the public at large. For both of these regulations, printed out single-sided, it's 3 to 4 pages of text. That can be fairly dense. And so hopefully in explaining, kind of the high points on this, we can kind of understand what the intent of the ordinances are, but also understand that moving forward, when we're looking at options for development, a lot of times the path of least resistance is the path that gets chosen. And so as we're writing an ordinance, we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that. Okay, so taking a look at ADUs first. Again, ADUs in some ways are very similar to secondary residences, but they are kind of distinguishable in a couple key points. So right now, to get a secondary residence, you have to have land that would otherwise be subdividable. For the most part, that means that you've got 10 or more acres. And then you come in for a conditional use permit, you pay that processing fee, and with very rare exception, that's normally granted. ADUs are a little different. ADUs are actually more designed for those parcels that can't be further subdivided. And so if you're thinking of a tract that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 acres, that would not be eligible for a secondary residence, but could be eligible for an accessory dwelling unit. To that exact same point, the idea with an accessory dwelling unit is it's not designed to be independent of the primary dwelling. It's not designed to be later subdivided off. Now, there's nothing that would prevent somebody with 10 acres or 15 acres or more from getting that ADU first. And so in the future, that could be subdivided off, but that would take the subdivision process. For those other parcels that are smaller and cannot be subdivided, the idea is that those two will be married together, and we'll provide a notice to title that indicates such. We don't want to basically have a pseudo subdivision at any point moving forward. Secondary residence is a residence as, once that you get that CUP, you basically build it to the same standards that you would, meet your setbacks and you're pretty much good to go. With accessory dwelling units, we do have additional design standards. We limit the square footage. If it fronts a county road or a state road, we're going to limit the way the front door faces. And so there are additional barriers there. And those barriers are designed to, again, make sure that it's very clear that the primary dwelling and that accessory dwelling are related to one another. And then finally, that secondary residence, like I said, that's a conditional use permit. It requires going in front of the Board of Adjustment. We just had the meeting last night right here. Accessory dwelling units, the assumption is that that is a use by right if they can meet those design standards. And so filling a very similar role for a lot of people, but kind of approaching it from two different angles. And the important thing is to realize that no one solution is going to meet everybody's needs. And so by adding this additional tool to our tool belt, this could be the one that makes sense for somebody who otherwise the secondary residence wouldn't have made sense for. Next slide.
Hey, Holden.
Yeah.
On that conditional use permit, if you're 10 acres or above already, why should you have to get a conditional use permit? If we're at 5 acre lots.
Yeah, it's because you're not subdividing. So
Okay.
by right, you get one primary residence on your parcel.
Okay.
And so that's that house that you get to build. Anytime you're taking multiples, we just want to review it.
So if they subdivide it, it's cool.
Subdivide it, it's by right again.
All right, gotcha.
Okay, so again, to just, talk over those key points of the accessory dwelling unit, one per parcel. That's another question that's come up. If I've got 15 acres, can I have my house and then can I get 3 more ADUs? No. This is kind of, think of it like the one freebie. Because it's, again, designed normally to serve like close relatives and family members. There's a reason why these are otherwise sometimes called mother-in-law suites. So one per parcel. They have to be smaller than the primary residence. We've limited ADUs that are detached to 50% of the square footage of the primary residence, never to exceed, I believe we have 1,250 square feet. There are some circumstances where if you have a very small primary residence, like 700 square feet, we'll still allow that accessory dwelling unit to be 400 square feet, because really anything below 400 square feet, you really start to run into this problem of is it truly livable? And so smaller than the primary residence.
Okay, so Holden, at one time we had thrown out the number like 30 or 35% of the size of the existing house, so that's no longer on the table?
So the 35%, what
Yeah.
we've said is that's applicable if it's an attached accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
And so detached or the vast majority of what we anticipate seeing, but if it's going to be attached, 35% is where that number comes in.
Okay.
Shared access, again, if these are related to one another, we want them sharing one driveway. We don't want to be punching new driveways in just for the accessory. Again, there's going to be, I think, some questions that come up about owner occupancy and the use of these as rentals and all sorts of things. If a residence has its own direct access separate from the main, it's really easy just to start treating it like its own thing. So that shared access is very important. And then finally, that owner occupancy requirement. The way staff has currently drawn this up is to require the owner occupancy in either the accessory dwelling or the primary residence. Property maintenance concerns are real. Integrity of neighborhood is real. Now, there are some kind of thought leaders in this sphere who say get rid of the owner occupancy requirement. Housing units are housing units. They can be utilized anyway, the same as any other house, right? Staff is kind of hesitant to go down that route. And so we do have an owner occupancy requirement built into this ordinance as it exists today. Next slide. Actually, I guess we'll pause there. Any more questions specific to the cluster or to the accessory dwelling units?
I'll make a comment. I think owner occupancy is a good idea, because if I'm thinking about this correctly, I could go buy a house as a rental house and put the ADU behind it, and now I've got basically 2 rental properties, which was never the intent of this regulation. So I agree with that.
I support keeping the owner occupancy as well.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to, I think, the more complex cluster development regulations. The last time the cluster development regulations were adopted was in 2007. And so we've been operating underneath the same set of cluster regulations for 19 years now. We are proposing some pretty significant changes. Before we get really into the specifics, one of the things that we have not previously talked about, but I think is kind of important to note here, is right now in our A1 and A5 zones, our density lines up with our minimum lot size. We require 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres in our rural areas, and at the same time we say you can't have a lot less than 5 acres. And so those two mirror each other. There's no reason, though, that requirement, by law has to persist. There is kind of this third option that we're not talking about today, but it's something I think for you to consider, which is in the A1 or A5 zones, to have a smaller lot size than 5 acres while keeping the density at 1 per 5, which could lead to a scenario where if you have 10 acres, you could just do a standard subdivision and go 2 acres and 8 acres. That is not what we're talking about today. The purpose of the cluster development regulation, and where I think we lost a lot of kind of usability previously, is the previous cluster development regulations still required 1 dwelling unit per 5 acre. So there was no natural incentive to go to a cluster development that was not already there for a standard subdivision. And past that point, the existing regulations for a cluster were significantly more complex than a standard subdivision to still result in the same number of parcels on the back end. And so that's the first major difference between what was previously adopted and what we're proposing today, is with the new proposed cluster development regulations, we would allow 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres, which is an increase in density, but as we'll get into in just a moment, it is, unless you go down to 1 acre lots or smaller on the actual development side of things, you'll never actually approach that density, but it will allow for slightly more parcels. One thing that's staying the same is anytime you do a cluster development regulations that's considered a major subdivision in our rural areas, it requires you to rezone to the A5 area. Anytime we rezone to the A5, as staff, we have to review it against the suitability for the area. Can the infrastructure handle the size of development that's being proposed? That comes into questions about roadway sufficiency, but also water sufficiency. Judge Covington, we recently had a meeting with the airport, and there were some concerns about major subdivisions of any type near the airport. Right now, in our comprehensive plan, which we'll be beginning the review process in 2027, but there is specific language that we're supposed to consider when rezoning to A5 that's found in the comprehensive plan. My proposal, separate from the cluster development regulations, is to ensure that in that future comprehensive plan, language specific to review against the airport, as well as environmentally sensitive areas, as well as infrastructure, is included in that document. And so that's my tactic moving forward for that.
To catch that. Now, just to go back, as part of that rezoning to A5, the concern of road width, the concern of if it's GMWSS or a Kentucky American, here's our proposal. Can you provide X amount of parcels to support that with water pressure? And if they say no, then that doesn't go. That's part of the process.
It's part of the process. Also important for all rezones, they're typically originate from the Planning Commission, but then do matriculate up to the Fiscal Court. You guys get to take a look at that. And so in that regard, ultimately, you'll have every document in front of you that you can make that decision
So
with.
that would be at the technical review committee stage.
Yeah, well, so it'll be technical review committee and then carry through as well.
Yeah, and, you know, John Ward, his team would be at the table and all those conversations.
Holden, this, I was getting, you took the words out of my mouth because I've had to deal with this a couple of times in my district. Right now, Holden, I might be diving right into the ditch right now, but if we have 3 5-acre tracts, okay, the fire department wants to have a fire hydrant there. And if the lines are not suitable, they can deny them that development, and/or you could offer to the developer or the property owner that they could resize the lines to where it is appropriate for Kentucky American or GMWSS. My question is in these clusters, if we have 3 houses on whether they're 3 5-acre tracts or 3 1.5-acre tracts, will that be the same requirement for a cluster to have fire hydrants? And that's I'm talking at the minimum level. If you have more houses, then you obviously would need more hydrants. But has that been considered? I think that's what Judge was alluding to.
And John will look at all the facts and data of the water lines nearby in the vicinity, and then the proposed siting of the houses, and then John says, hey, we've got the pressure there, or we don't. Is that correct, John?
So, that's going to be part of this in these considerations to adopt this language, correct?
Yeah, so the way that the regulation is currently written is all cluster lots shall have public water supply. In addition, fire hydrants are required to be installed where the appropriate size water lines are present in order to maximize fire protection. Right now, again, that says where the appropriate size water lines are present. You could, as a further consideration, again, I trust John, but you could just end the sentence at, in addition, fire hydrants are required to be installed.
Yeah.
And just end the sentence there.
I've got a subdivision that they have, $500,000 homes in there, and the lines are not sufficient to, provide for one hydrant for a whole subdivision. I don't like that. That's not good. So I want to make sure going forward we don't get back in that situation again.
And John's team, been very active in the technical review piece and have been, I think, more so than ever. Would you agree with that statement?
I would 100% agree with that. I would also just add that in reviewing that rezone, one of the things we consider is the response time of our emergency service providers. And so we're well aware, and I think, again, we can always strengthen the language on that, because if we are having a large number of residents cluster together, we want that. The one thing, again, that I'll caution is, that is not a requirement that we always have for every subdivision.
Right.
And so then again, which kind of subdivision do you want them leaning towards?
Yeah.
So moving forward, one of the other changes that we're proposing right now is when you have applicable either sewer or sanitary capacity, reducing the minimum lot size from 1.75 acres within a cluster all the way down to half an acre. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second, because, again, understand that the lot size does not dictate the overall density of the development. The overall density of the development can never exceed 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. But how then that number of lots is distributed in the development, where it was 1.75, we are recommending that goes down to half an acre. Otherwise, the other two big things is we're saying a 50% preserve minimum, and then we are saying that preserve can be achieved in no less than 25-acre increments. And that was, again,
the parent tract has to be a minimum of 50 acres.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say there are some, edge cases where somebody might have 49, and they say, well, I'm just going to preserve the 25 to meet that requirement, and I'm just going to develop on the 24, and I'll lose that acre. But yes, for the most part, this is designed for the idea being that 50 is really going to be about the minimum that we're going to see. And again, when I show the next slide,
And I want to stress, that's the way it's being proposed at this point.
yes. I think we've already talked through all of this pretty well, and so we'll go to the next one. Here we go. Okay, so we've done a fair bit of math, and you guys each have a handout in front of you because the numbers are small. A pretty fair bit of math where we've looked at kind of what it would look like if we set the preserve acreage at 50%, which is what staff recommended and which Planning Commission has forwarded on to you, but also then extrapolated out what happens as that preserve acreage increases based on the size of the lots that are to be developed. Down very near the bottom, I have included what happens if you just have 5-acre tracts. And so again, with the preserve minimum being 25 acres, we've assumed that the cluster development is going to be 50 acres. With 5-acre tracts, you're getting 10. And so if you look up above, anything that's 10 or less is likely to never happen because you would be getting fewer parcels if you clustered versus a standard subdivision. Everything above 10, that's where you consider is the burden of the regulation justifiable to the additional units that you would be able to achieve. And so I'll start with the 50% one, and I'll just let you guys kind of understand how that math plays out from there. We've said inside of cluster development that one lot always has to remain with the preserve tract. We've said that you get one dwelling unit per 2 acres. So on 50 acres of total land, by right, you can have a maximum of 25 total lots. One goes with the preserve tract, and so that gives you 24 for inside the actual cluster itself. With 2-acre tracts, which is the maximum for a cluster tract or a cluster lot, you will still only get 12, which would leave you with 12 clusters and then 1 preserve for 13 total. 1.75 is the minimum, it's the minimum lot size for cluster that staff feels comfortable allowing preliminary approval before the health department gets involved. 1.75 is also the previous minimum that was in the old regulation. So we feel confident that that can work without any sort of special steps that we need to take. When you go to 1.75 as your minimum, again, 25 maximum units, you're only actually getting 14 in the cluster and then 1 left with the preserve. Again, compare that to the 10 overall that you would get with the standard subdivision. You are getting 4 more lots. The way the regulation is currently written, anything below 1.75 acres requires pre-approval by the health department to certify that the soils on that parcel can handle the septic load. And if they can't, they have to look for another solution off-site or connect to sewer some other avenue. Judge Covington.
Just on the 1.75, that threshold, before they get a building permit, it seems logical to me that, and I think it's the way it is now, that the health department goes out there and makes sure that it perks.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And that's still in there.
That's absolutely in there. The kind of the separation that we have is you get a rezone, you get that preliminary subdivision plat. If it's 1.75 or greater, you don't have to talk to the health department until after the preliminary subdivision plat. If you propose something with lots smaller than 1.75, you have to talk to the health department and get those sites pre-perked, basically just site registration, before we'll issue that preliminary approval. So we're actually putting the health department up front if you're having smaller lots.
As the 1.75, is that also including infrastructure as well? So you can map it out, you see what I'm saying? And you can have all these parcels. But I mean, like a road to it. Is that included? I guess, how can I say that? Will that be separate or?
Yeah, that's separate. If you've
Okay.
got roads that meet our
So
county standards.
it'll reduce the overall acreage that you have for
Yeah.
availability to farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll see the break-even point when you finally get to the 24 dwelling units is when you get to 1-acre clusters. At 1 acre is where you will have exactly 50% preserved and 50% developed. That's the break-even point. And then you can carry that up. You can see how that matriculates from the other percentages. But And this is why I think the ability to achieve smaller cluster lots is so important. If you can provide for septic infrastructure or sewer or some other capacity that you can facilitate those half-acre lots, you're still capped at 24 because the density doesn't increase. But all of a sudden now, instead of preserving 50% of the total site, you're actually preserving 76% of the total site. And so same number of units, the developer gets much more than they would have if they'd go through a standard subdivision, but we're actually preserving more agricultural land than we would be otherwise. Now, Judge Covington, I know that you guys last fiscal year put forward some dollars to purchase development rights. You know that's expensive.
500,000, and we're waiting on review from the USDA on, the Rural Land Management Board has submitted 2 applications, and we're waiting on that feedback, but we have $500,000.
Yeah. If we can create an effective regulation that preserves that land in the same way, this is, I think, a money-saving tool for you guys. If we can get a regulation that is utilized by the public that they want to participate in, all of a sudden that agricultural and open space begins to be preserved one tract at a time. And so again, when you get small, you can preserve more. And so keep that in mind. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. And this is where we're just going to look at some pictures. Very briefly, this is your standard subdivision. When you get 50 acres, it's going to look, divided into 5s, it's going to look something like this. What we've heard time and time again is when you end up with this, 5 acres is a really big lawn. It's not. It's great for a garden, maybe not so much for traditional agricultural activities. We'll go to the next one.
I think it's very fair to say that there's minimal true agricultural activities on that size parcel.
Yeah. For A1, the same for A5, 50-foot setbacks all around. And also, to be clear, if somebody did want to come in and had 50 acres and they want to divide it all in 5s, it would still go through the rezoning process, and we would still take a look and we check on fire. And so keep that in mind, but this is just, again, as an example. We'll go to the next one. This is just a really kind of rough layout of what a cluster development could look like. A couple important things to note here is, again, no less than 50% of the land is being preserved. The development that you see there has a couple more lots than the 10 that would normally be there. And so you do get a few more houses to, I think, in part to justify the increased infrastructure cost of this type of development.
This is the proposed one here, Holden.
This is one of the ways that it could look. This is not something that somebody has submitted to us. This was us in here just drawing lines on paper. Remember again that the development regulations to achieve this are 4 pages long. And so we leave it to the developer to figure out how they, or the property owner, how they want to meet our requirements. This is one of them. You'll notice an important one here is all cluster lots are accessed from internal access points. We don't want same with ADUs, we don't want separate driveways being punched in. Same thing for cluster lots. All of them need to be accessed internally. And so we'll go to the next one. Again, this shows that internal access. So we make sure that the street that the cluster division is connecting to can handle the connection. We ensure that the kind of the entrance into the cluster is sufficient to handle the traffic. But once you get on site, it's all internal. And we'll go next. We do require screening. Between the cluster lots and the preserve acreage, we require a significant amount of buffering. If the purpose of the preserved acreage is to allow for open space or agricultural use, then we want to make sure that the same way we protect our other ag lands from incursions of other development types, we protect that preserved acreage as well. And so we've got an entire ordinance dedicated to our agricultural buffering requirements. This would trigger that. We help to kind of separate that close residential use from that agricultural use. So we'll go to the next one.
Hey, could I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Can you go back to the other slide?
Yeah.
So on all the green space there on the right, that's no longer, the owner of that property can't sell 5 acres off of that existing property anymore.
No. No, they have basically shifted all of their density down into that corner on the bottom
Right.
left there. They get one house, because we do want a development credit associated with the reserve.
Right. Well, and I'm just thinking about our USDA stuff and the questions we've had, and it's been tested in court, like, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and somebody comes back and says, well, things have changed, and now we're going to try to. I don't know if that's.
It's pretty iron tight. It's
Okay.
a notice to the plat, it's a notice to the title, it's part of the regulations. This is not a new type of ordinance. Other communities have used it very effectively.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions. I had one, but I'm just going to tie into this because I think it ties into that. I mean, it says in here, though, in T, I don't know where I'm at in this thing, it just says T. If this is on the edge, though, and the city annexes it, all that goes away and they can develop the rest of this property.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's a huge concern for me going forward, that it could just be like, we could do all this, city could come in and annex it, and that preserved land, poof, is gone.
Let me put one thing forward to you. Typically, when a city is going to annex a property, they're going to rezone it anyway. The lowest density kind of residential zone that we have in our existing ordinance is R1A. And R1A allows for one dwelling unit per 2.2 dwelling units per acre. That's 4 times as dense as this already is.
So,
In that situation, if it's already within the urban service boundary and it's annexed, the expectation is you annex to build at an urban density.
Well,
let me ask this. Could we not require, as part of this process, that the owner and developer sign a conservation easement that puts that into a conservation state for perpetuity, just like a PDR? I mean, it's a.
like that.
I'm with
If
Ryan.
we're
I can't control what the city annexes, and I can't control that. But if you want to do this development, you are required to sign off that there's a conservation easement.
I like that. I mean, like, the whole point of us doing this
And
is
even if
prefer.
the city annexes it, that doesn't trump the conservation easement.
Right?
Yeah.
Can we do that? I mean, we want to preserve farmland.
Cam, I think we can.
Know. I have to research that. You
Okay.
have any
Can I enter in on this?
prior knowledge on that?
NCRS and FSA, I've been working on a farm over in Bourbon County. They've got a grassland easement on it permanent, and so it can be farmed, cattle, horses, whatever. There's just some deadlines in there of when you can and cannot mow, in order for wildflowers, but most of all for wildlife. And that's a permanent easement.
So what you're saying, there's options.
It's not, yeah.
I'd like to see options.
There's another option, ag districts. Ag districts, you cannot be annexed into the city. There's a limit right now, they reduced it to 50 acres, but if you have a neighboring and they have 20 and you have 40, because we would like the minimum be 40,
So you
then
can.
if they connect, that's 60 acres, and you could do an ag district. You just have to be recertified every 5 years, but you can never be annexed into the city. We actually have several in the city, ag districts, and they're not annexed into the city. That's just another thing that
I know,
you do.
and I think you do, but I know you do as well, because y'all send out those notices when there's a new proposed ag district.
Yes.
I mean, could you share that with me so I could share that with the court so they could see the existing ag districts? Just
Yeah, I can send you an
yeah,
email.
and I'll send it out to the court. And
Yeah.
I think it'd be good for them to see, but I think part of this process, what we went through this whole stakeholders meetings, and the concern was the 5-acre tract is impacting agricultural practices, and this whole effort is to preserve good land that will sustain some farming, and if like what Ryan's saying, if the city wanted to annex it, then all of that was for naught. So if you want to do this type of development, we need to find a requirement that says, hey, that green space is in a conservation state, whatever might it be, or ag district. We can put in there, you can create an ag district or a conservation easement, either or. You're accomplishing the desire of preserving ag land. So Holden, thank you.
Yep. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah. Break it down.
Sorry.
Not at all. I think that's, if that achieves the goal, let's go for it. So the other thing to just kind of look at is for cluster lots, 150-foot minimums for width. The front yard setback is still 50 feet. The rear yard setback is still 50 feet, mirroring the A1 zone. The real difference is your side yards. Side yards now can be 25 feet when they abut another cluster lot. If they abut anything other than a cluster lot, it's back to 50. And so,
I think that's fair.
yeah. Next slide. Which, by the way, that 25 feet is still much larger than like a standard.
4 feet.
Yeah. That's a different one. And so this demonstrates exactly that. Where the cluster lot abuts anything else, you're going to have that larger setback. And I think we're nearing the end now. See if we got one more. That's it. And so at this point, I'd love to answer any questions specific to the regulations. Again, this is kind of brought forward after a number of community conversations, a number of iterations. This is what was forwarded by the Planning Commission. If we can find tweaks to the language, we'd be more than happy to help you work on those. I think in particular, taking a look at the fire hydrant requirements, and then in particular, again, looking at that conservation easement for the green space. The one thing that is in here that was not specifically called out is related to septic infrastructure. In order to achieve something like a 1 acre lot or less, what we've heard from the health department is that you're very likely not going to be able to have all the septic infrastructure on site. There's just not enough land for the septic system, the drain fields, and then a 100% preserve, which we require. And so instead, there's the option to locate some of that septic infrastructure on the cluster parcel, as long as there are access easements, maintenance agreements, and for every acre or partial acre of land in the preserve that's utilized for the septic infrastructure, the size of that preserve has to increase above that 50% mark. And so we are never going to have less than 50% of the preserve be encumbered, or rather flip that. There will never be less than 50% that is unencumbered green space, open space, ag land, whatever it is. But as we've also talked about, in order to maximize the preserve percentage, we need smaller lots. And you start to see that improvement when you get to less than 1 acre.
And all of that is tied to the topography and the layout of the parcels, and then if it perks and if it doesn't, and
Yep.
all those moving pieces. Questions about that, you all?
I kind of got two questions. One, as far as, we talked about the water lines. I just wonder if there's a map that could show us the water lines out in the county that would be able to handle fire hydrants.
Sure. I'm sure it's out there.
Because I know there's a lot out in the county that really wouldn't handle the fire hydrants if somebody wanted to do a development out that way. And then the second question I got, and I don't know if you can do it right now, but the math on what we have in place right now on a 50-acre tract compared to what we would have with the new.
Yeah.
Rob, what was that last piece I couldn't hear?
The math on how many acres would be saved from what we have now compared to what is being proposed.
So if you will, I can do that really quick actually. So you get.
I tried to do it up here, but.
So because the density is still 120 per 5, you're at max going to have 10 acres. With 2 acres each, which is the maximum for that, 10 times 2 is 20. So you would build on 20, you would preserve 30, so you'd have 60% preserved.
Okay.
If you got that down to 1.75, you'd have a little bit more. My pushback, though, is we have not seen many of these cluster developments come through. What I have seen is a lot of 5-acre developments which preserve 0. And so that is, again, the intent
I
of
understand
finding
that,
it.
But
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
60-40.
We're talking about clusters and not 5-acre lots.
Yep.
So what I was doing on my math, I had the same number as you, is 30 acres being saved on what we have now on a cluster. If we go to this new one, we're only saving 25 acres.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the new one's helping us save any acreage or not.
Well, I think again, it's my
I know it's
opinion
gonna
on
help the
this.
developer because he's gonna be able to get more lots, but I don't know if it's helping the farmland because we're not really saving any more farmland.
Well, the two things I'd point out is we now have the potential to save way more than 60% if we allow for the smaller
If we go
parcel
to
size.
smaller parcels, but
The
like,
second
again,
one,
that's
though-
helping the developer.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's
No,
really
it's-
helping us save much more
And
farmland.
you guys, that'll, I think, be the big part of the conversation. But the other thing is we haven't saved any land with the cluster the way we've written it because no one's used it.
Nobody's using it. I mean, I remember when we wrote that, when
Yeah.
I was on the plan commission, we come up with that A5 and we thought it was gonna be a game changer and it really didn't. I mean, we've had 2 or 3 since we wrote that ordinance.
That was my question.
With the 5-acre lot was the concern, that was the thing. You sat right there with me, and with the 5-acre lot, we're not preserving any ag, in my mind. We're not, but it's all good conversation.
So when was the last cluster development? It's been 6 or 8 years ago?
At least.
Or longer than that?
Yeah.
It's, no, we've had one since I've been on the
Kane
court.
Run, Willow.
10 years.
Winding Oaks.
Development?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant when we last.
Kane Run,
I'm sorry.
Winding Oaks, maybe the last one.
Kane Run was the last one.
And then before that, there had not been one seen prior to the recession in 2008. So it was
Where's
one
Winding
for
Oaks?
the past 10 and then.
And the reason I bring,
Which Kane Run extended. So before that, it goes all the way back before the recession of 08.
So 1 in 20 years more realistically.
yeah.
So just to give you all, and I need to ask Whitley, because Whitley's been so instrumental in giving data and such, but, the data Whitney shared in late 24, was that in 2010, we had 1,431 5-acre lots in the A1 zone. In 2024, it had moved to 1,862. That's an additional 431 5-acre lots that are 0 ag. That's just the real data that I want you all to know. And then the acreage attributed to that was about 2,170 acres difference is what I got from Whitley. So it'd be nice maybe to update that from her September of 24 to today. Just any other questions or comments, and then I'll open it up for Ryan.
You have a couple questions. One, I was kind of reading both of these. So the ADUs that are attached don't count for density. So could you also have could I then cluster 20 houses with 20 ADUs to create can I then get around density by creating 20 houses with 20 ADUs in a cluster development, thus bringing in 40 families if we did both? Because I don't see a distinction. Like how would we keep from a density like that? Because there's no minimum lot size for an attached ADU. I'm sorry if
That's a really good question.
So are you saying like a?
So for the ADU, I was reading through it. There's no minimum lot size for an attached ADU. There is for a detached.
So you're saying that like Walnut Creek, they could put a
I don't know what.
attached?
Basically, I could come into 50 acres and do half-acre lots and create 24 units. I could then, because an attached ADU doesn't count against acreage, I could basically create 48 attached with ADUs. Now, I know that we've talked about owner occupancy, and I don't know if I would ever do that, but
But owner occupancy would, I mean, it'd be what if they have all those lots get developed and have ADUs? I don't think that's a real.
I mean, I don't know.
If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry
I just think
Christmas.
it's something that needs to be thought about and maybe planned for, right? Because I think it's my other question is like, who's going to monitor? Like, it'd be very, very difficult to monitor and to enforce if anybody's using one of those as a short-term rental, right? I mean, that's like, I don't even know begin how you would, because I could short-term rental my house.
That one, actually.
Huh?
So we're supposed to require, and is this just short term? Is this Scott County as well? They need to register.
Scott County Tourism.
Yeah, they need to register. And so
they search through the Airbnb. I'm sure there's some that slip through, but they have a ability to search, the Airbnb database, I believe, and those.
I can comment on that too. Like, if somebody's going to do it for long-term rental, and there's no way to monitor that in the future. A family member moves out, now it's empty, they want to rent it, but the shared access and maybe it's shared utilities, and hopefully it's set up to where they don't want to have rental property attached to them.
But you're limiting the, in my mind, by having the, shared access, all those, the driveway, utilities, like you're getting an additional dwelling unit, but not impacting ag. Because what's happening is if you have a 5-acre lot, or if you have, you're getting a lot of those people that want to build that so-called accessory dwelling unit, and they're carving off additional parcels to build another dwelling unit, in my mind.
No, I think you're right. I think if you had 20 acres and you want to give 5 acres to your kid, you give them 5 acres, and now you've just taken 5 acres because that's the dwelling, where now we could do something less. So, yeah, I agree with you.
I have 2 more questions. That was just my first thought. Is like, man, maybe we should look at that. So AA says, it talks about soils, and it just says that it means that agriculture, like when they're going to cluster, that they're going to they would like to try to preserve the agricultural land versus the not. But there's nothing that really required, like, if we're really trying to preserve agricultural land, why would the agricultural land not take precedence for the preservation area versus the non-best soils?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's very weak language.
And it's intentionally so. And so let me kind of address that really from 2 different points. The first point is when you do a standard subdivision, that's not in there anywhere in the requirement. And so right there, we're putting a barrier to get to this cluster development that otherwise would not be applicable. And we talk again about the path of least resistance. That's one more barrier that's improved. Okay? The second one is when we talk again about just the physical constraints of development. If we require this map to be presented, it all of a sudden opens up an entire conversation around, well, why is this lot right here, and can't you move this lot over here, and what about right here, and all of these ifs and buts that we've just kind of discussed. When the reality is that the buildable land is where they're going to be putting these cluster spaces. And if the idea is not just agricultural use, but open space, green space, which is a lot of Scott County, we need to make allowances for that as well. So just realistically, people build houses where they can build houses. We don't require this of other subdivisions. If we require that, are we really in a place to dictate to the property owner exactly the layouts of their lots? And I don't think we are.
Questions or?
Last one. I was reading through the ADU stuff. What if an HOA doesn't allow, will this supersede like an HOA? Or is there any language, I don't know if that's even a question for Cam. It's like if I live in a neighborhood that says no ADUs.
Yeah.
Will this supersede that, or does the HOA still?
Well, so HOAs are private agreements. We do not enforce HOA requirements.
That covenant exists before the purchase. If there is.
Yeah. But the short answer is we don't enforce it. We also don't verify it. That is not our regulation, and that's the same for any of the other There's HOA requirements related to, facade types or lots and lots of other kind of issues. No cars in the driveway, things like that. We don't get involved. But it would not prohibit the HOA from enforcing its covenants.
That's the last question I had.
That was it.
That's it.
All right.
Done. Unless you'd like to ask some more,
I love them.
If there's no
No,
other
that's
questions
how we
from
get to a
any-
better spot.
If there's no other question from any magistrate, then I'll open it for anyone that wants to address the court and make comment.
Thank you.
Let me do it for soil and water. Roger's supposed to be here, but he's making hay while the sun shines. You have a letter in front of you, and in it you will see basically our response. A lot of what Holden has told you, we agree with. But again, we're pushing the preservation of agriculture. To be a farm, you gotta be 10 acres according to USDA. Unless it's a special urban-centered farm, to classify as a farm, to get their help, 10 acres, nothing else. And then as Darcy said, there's a lot of ways to preserve. I'm learning more and more as I'm studying this thing. But just recently, the state said on an ag district, 50 acres. It used to be 250. It has to be continuous. It can be 2 farms, as she said, but the farmland has to touch. That's one way of doing it. And as she said, once it's in, it's in. City cannot annex it. So that's another way of preserving. The main thing we're pushing is farmland, and the good farmland. And as said, the builders want to build on good farmland because it's flat, it's easy to do. They don't want to go to Sadeville area and build. Although if you've ever been to Smoky Mountains, drive through Knoxville, they're putting factories on those mountains down there. So it's a possible alternative to what we're doing. It just costs more. And they don't want to put it up. Now, when you come to the preserved tracts, as Holden was talking about, we believe that on that preserved land, you need to have a separate driveway going into it for agricultural purposes. Because a lot of times you come out of a field with a piece of equipment, there's mud all over the tires, and if you have one drive in, everybody's going to complain because that mud's going to fly off those tires in all directions. So it needs to have a separate drive-in. Another thing to be sure is that it can accommodate farming. It doesn't matter if you've got a horse across the pasture like the judge does in that piece, or if they're like Triple J, Elmwood, Evans, and they're doing vegetable crops, I left that by water. Or if like a lot of Scott County is covered with cattle, and now sheep are coming back into Scott County. But we need to have it so you can have livestock. Recommendation from the University of Kentucky for our type of soils around here is 1 animal, and I'm talking the large ones, cow, calf, or horse, per 2 acres. That's minimum. Otherwise, what they have is a field of nothing but mud. And that's where we move in on them. Or there'd be like where I'm semi-retired, my 40 acres is all hay. And we sell the hay off of it. The other thing we're going to ask you is be sure that the preserved acres are not divided off.
And that, like the conservation easement.
Well, the conservation easement, something of that nature, recommend it. Hidden Creek subdivision in the work you've got, you can see where they had the preserved, but then they turned around and divided the preserved into 5 acres. That defeats the whole process. Another problem that I have seen, and I'm going to skip Brookland because Brookland is the perfect example. It has the land set aside. It was actually sold off. The Smith family is doing ag on it. It's wide enough for machinery as compared to the one that you've got out there at Coal Ridge. It's got preserved land, but you can't do anything with that narrow strip. So these are things for you all to consider if you're really wanting to preserve the farmland. Septic system is where we're going to disagree. If there's a septic system on a piece of property, it reduces what that farmer can do with it. It needs to be able to stay within the cluster.
Now, the way I understand, like, if the septic extends out into the preserve, for every acre that it does, then the preserve has to grow. So, did you know?
I noticed that, but that completely eliminates a piece of machinery going over that septic system. When I'm custom mowing for somebody, that's the first thing they worry about is the weight of the tractor over the septic system. Afraid it's going to collapse it or afraid that piece of equipment is going to damage it. So that cuts it completely out of being used for farming.
I'd have to respectfully agree to disagree, because right on my property, my septic extends into where a sod cultivator grows sod and does sod every year, and it's not impacted my.
No, but
my
how
septic.
long have you had the septic system, Judge? How long have you been out there?
A dozen years.
How many?
A dozen.
See, you've had time for that drains and everything to fill, and so if they're full, you don't have the compaction. If it's a new system, those drain lines aren't full yet, then you're going to have that compaction, and that drain line is going to collapse from the weight of the tractor.
And I understand the concern, respect the concern. I think
Yeah.
there is a legitimate
Yeah.
concern there, but I think that's.
Yeah, and that would have to be, and again, you need the agreement between the farmer and whoever is doing the asset developing work.
Well, and the farmer shouldn't be encumbered by any requirements of a septic system, so if you do that, that's fine. It should be maintained as ownership of the HOA, and don't even bother the landowner as a farm.
Yeah.
Call it what it is.
So you're saying, Debbie, that if it extends into the preserve, the HOA ought to be responsible for its upkeep?
Totally. Put a fence around it, it's theirs.
Holden, what's your thoughts on that?
So the good news is when we do a cluster development like this, the assumption is it's all under single ownership to begin with.
Yeah.
And so somebody, if in working out that maintenance agreement, is writing it themselves while they own all of the parcels at play. And if something is then sold to a farmer, it's sold having already established all these rules, covenants, restrictions, or whatever it is. It's already set up in advance, and everyone's got their eyes open walking into it. Now, the very last section of the regulations that we have written, and this is what it is. This is section BB. A homeowner's agreement is required for cluster proposals, and so that's all of them. The homeowner's agreement must include language specific to the repair and maintenance of any shared septic infrastructure. And then until such a time as Scott County accepts any roads designed to public road standards, the ownership and maintenance of the roads, rights of way, and drainage structures will be the responsibility of the homeowners. So there is a homeowner's agreement at play. I think kind of the question that's left to be answered is we have a preserved unit on the preserved acreage. The question is then, is that homeowner also a part of the homeowner's agreement that then maintains the septic? And that's an open question. We can look into that. Again, staff's intent was that yes, it's the HOA is going to maintain everything, but there is a house on the preserved tract. How does that play in?
We've had that situation before out in Willowbrook, and they developed 4 or 5 acre tracts behind the cluster subdivision, and they did not, planning and zoning at that time did not require, I mean, at my request that they were required to be a part of the HOA, but planning and zoning thought otherwise. So maybe getting that language written out beforehand.
One of the things too to also consider, is there's language in here that if, and I think this is probably what happened. Oh, I'm sorry. What's the name of the cluster? You said they added 5 acre tracts.
It's 25 acres.
Hidden Creek.
So with Hidden Creek, I'll tell you what happened is they originally platted and they said, we got 57 units, and they developed 52 units. And so they had those 5 left, 5 times 5 acres apiece. That's how we got to the 25 there. One of the sections in this says that planning and zoning may require a master plan for the full farm if they're requesting a cluster. And we would do that in a circumstance where they are proposing a cluster on some, but maybe they don't want to cluster off everything quite yet, or maybe they're not ready to get those last units yet. And so that's where we could use that master plan to show the future phases of development. This again, still, I think you're right. I think if the idea is that we need to have our eyes open coming into this, if they plan 5 acre units in the future, those need to be a part of the same homeowners association. Still the question of what do you do with the house that's left on the preserved tract?
Keith, go back to you.
Yes. David, you got anything to add? You're the one who was sent to me, I just think.
Go ahead. I'll jump.
All right, well, I was gonna say, I'm about at the end of mine.
Oh, here we go, I messed up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So
Come on up,
septic
Debbie.
system- what?
Would you come on up?
Yeah, have the mic.
I'm
That way we
shy.
got the mic. Since we.
The thing is, like on my farm, I have a large utility line, so, but it's a utility easement, so we can hay under it, we can graze under it, and if you're familiar with the line, we can do whatever we want to until they come in and replace the poles and cause other issues, but the thing about it is a septic system is not a utility line, it's not a utility easement. You are limited. I'm sorry. I hay over top of my septic system, my leach field, and every year ago, is this the year? I don't know. But there are issues that, and I'm sorry, I'm not putting down farmers, but if you give them an inch and something happens to that septic system, do they then come back against the farmer? I don't know. I don't know. That's for the future. But I just
That
simply
you're saying put a fence around it and.
do something and just keep it out of their ownership. Just separate them. Don't involve them. Just separate it out. But the key thing is, one of the key things, I don't know if he hit on it or not, was the original cluster went back to 60% preservation. Our whole intent in getting involved was farmland preservation. If we achieve 50% preservation, we've gone down 10%. I don't care how you get there. We want to go back to the 60%. We don't want to see the preserve area divided into multiple lots. Make it one. Make it true farmland. 25 acres are hobbyists. I don't care what you say. It's hobby farming. We went through on Google Earth and looked at all the plats. Maybe one had a cow or two on it. I don't know. But the rest were just being mowed. So what you're doing is you're keeping the mower operators in business by mowing this 25 acres over and over and over again. So be real.
Everybody needs a job, Debbie.
I know, everybody needs a job. And another thing is, a nightmare that's arising here recently is, it's not in our ordinance, is fencing. And when these clusters are put in, the boundary line fence has to go in prior to construction between the preserved tract and the constructed tracts. It just has to be. We have too many problems arising, and if you're truly setting that land aside for farming, set it up for farming. Put that fence in there before they have 20 different landowners to go to say, hey, put up your money for fencing, because they're not going to. Let's just be honest here. There was one more point, it's fleeting, but I guess that's it really. So, go ahead, yeah.
No, I'll come up there with you. The letter that we had wrote to you, I just want to make sure that you guys read it, but reference it. On page 3 is the plot, and you can see, because they're asking for a 25 minimum acre for farming, and we had open records request all the plats for the ordinances, and we spent a lot of time getting them all together and looking at all these subdivisions and stuff. And the Hidden Creek subdivision, you can see that there was 189 acres or 190 acres in preserved, but it was all only 25 tracts. And when she was saying, we went on Google Earth, it was all mowed. There was one that had some fences in there that had some horses, but they're all mowed, so it's not an agricultural use at all. And each one of those tracts had a house on it. So it's preserved land, it can never be further developed, but it's not agricultural use. And then also, if you look at our letter on page 4, we have one, that's the Brooklyn Estates. It was 119 acres, one continuous one preserved, and it's actively farming. And then you can see how where the residential lots, how it's very, it's clustered in this one area, which led the other area open, which is very conducive to farming. And then on page, I think it is on page 6, there is an example, that's the Coal Ridge development, where there is one thing on there, 100 feet width, but you can see how this one is. They just put the residential units, and then they left, it's one single track, but you can see the breakdown, and then you've got a little space that you have to go to here to go to there. It's not really conducive to really truly agricultural farming. And so we really want you to consider the 40-acre minimum of these. I know they're saying 50% because they're looking at the smaller, parts of it, but we're really looking at truly agriculture. 40 acres is pretty much the minimum to get in there to farm. And also, to have a cow-calf, you have to have 2.5 acres to support a cow-calf. So if you had 50 acres and you have 25 acres, then, and you have the house, you have your barn or however you set up, but then you have to have your pastures for rotation. Then you have to, unless you buy hay, you have to have your pastures for hay if you're doing a livestock. 25 acres if you're going to do some corn and soybeans on there. The number of acreage may not be enough for what you're sending it to market either. I mean, it's just really, what we had was good. What we would like to see extended, on the last page of our letter, there's it's proposal. What we're suggesting is a compromise. So you're still using the old formula. You have 100 acres, you divide it by 5, you get 20 units. Now we're saying times that 20 units by 1.5 residential units, you'll get 30. So you're increasing that density within that cluster, but you're not affecting the percentage of preserved land. So you're still getting an increase, but you're not doing that. And so just please, we put a lot of effort into this. We did a lot of research with the help of them. Just take a look at it. And that's all I have to say.
I have 2 more points.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I've had time to think. Holden had said about we don't restrict subdivision development layout based on soils for subdivisions, but normal subdivisions are already annexed. Who cares? I mean, you're already at high density, so you're slamming a house in, putting a house in, anywhere you can. So that's really different from being out in the countryside where you are looking at your soils. So you can give more precedent to it. The other thing is the parking thing, and this is a question out of ignorance, okay? I've never built a new house, so I don't know anything about it. But would it be wise to go in there and do perk testing prior to laying out your cluster subdivision to see where is the most appropriate place to put the houses? Isn't that better planning? I mean, engineers sign these site plans, put these site plans together. I've worked with many of them. Wouldn't that just be something we could or should do prior to saying, let's multiply everything times 1.75 to step aside from the health department? Let's get everybody involved up front and get a better plan.
So you're suggesting if there's a conceptual plan, that the conceptual plan along with that application, as part of the technical review committee, the health department would, if it's below 1.75, is that right? Then they would have to.
That's what we're already proposing. That's in there. Anything below 1.75.
But above 1.75, you're saying still go out and park it?
I'm saying if you're going for those little lots, just find out where it parks and make sure you're putting your lots where they should go versus having to come back and alter it, versus saying, hey, let's do everything at 1.75 and avoid the health department. Let's bring the health department in at phase 1. Just thought.
Well, thank you all. Any other comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I like the fact that something you brought up today, which I had not thought of, but it's not in the document where you say you require a master plan of the development beforehand that you need to approve.
That's section X.
Hold on. It says may. I didn't. Cam could very well, if it's may, we're not going to do it. So if it says shall provide a master plan, that's fine. But the may is optional, and you're never going to get it done. Anyway, as on one of your slides, you said minimum lot size half acre without sewer. But then when you made a statement, it says minimum size half acre with a septic system. So I have a real problem that you're going to build a house on a half acre lot when there's no way, engineering wise, unless that's a perfect lot, you can have a septic system and a reserve septic system, reserve area, which I believe you require now anyhow. So if you only have half an acre, you can't get those two things on it, and a house other than a large shed to live in. Let's see, language says where the water lines, this is for the fire department, where the water lines are available for hydrants, they'll be put in. But that, it needs to be required that they be put in. And it should not be an expense to the county.
Never is.
Okay. I found it very interesting that, let me get the right one here. The pictures were great. They had all the agricultural land connected. It was, and you used the word correctly. I can't even pronounce the word. Contingent or whatever it is, contiguous, whatever. Yeah. It says in this document, it does not have to be. And that is on, let's see. Connected. And similar to what these folks said, you're setting up this property, and the developer is going to develop everything that's flat and clean. And your ag reserve is the pond and the rock. When you move farther up the county, the place that you can't use ag, it's the stream bed. It's all those places, because the developer is going to put it where it's less work for them and more money for them because they have to pay less. And so you're saving land that's not ag. And I don't want to put the pressure on the developers saying, we can't use good land, but you can't use all the good land and leave the agricultural section, non-developable property, non-usable property. It might be open space, but it's not usable property. I didn't know I was going to speak today, so that's why but I will speak the next time if you will allow me, and I'll be a little more prepared, and I'll also be sending another letter. So you can kind of get my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that said, then, we will, if there's no other comment, then we'll look at, I think looking at, what is the pleasure of the court? Our next meeting is June the 12th, and that's too quick to have a first reading, in my opinion. But June 25th would be a 6 o'clock meeting. So between now and then, to have some type of meeting to take any other public comment.
But if we make any changes, wouldn't it have to go back before the
Yeah,
planning
I was
commission?
getting ready to say that. If it's substantive, which everything I've heard is pretty substantive, yeah, I think it would.
Planning commission would have to approve it
Yeah.
again.
One main thing I would like to see is what Joe, Pat, and I think Kelly also mentioned as well, is I don't know what it would be, preserving that farmland. So if it's annexed, it can't be, I don't know if it's a, conservation easement, a land easement,
Or an ag district.
or something. I know it's going to be a substantial change, but that's,
Is that a substantial change that
I
you'd
would
have to
argue
take?
because the planning commission already looks at it as non-dividable, no future development. I would, if it's just a conservation easement requirement, I wouldn't say that's substantial. That's just reaffirming the court's language, what the planning commission's intent was.
I really think we should look at putting something in there. And I think that accomplishes a major piece of what your all's concern is. The two biggest things is the size of the preserve, and then making sure that preserve is farmable. And, the debate of your all's stance is that 25 acres is not truly something that you can farm, but 40 acres is. So that's their stance.
And I'll make a quick comment too, and to address some of the questions and concerns, because I think it's really hard, when you look at a property to develop and you're the developer, and obviously anything in the floodplain you're going to count out, probably the rocky hard stuff that doesn't perk, and just by nature it ends up being the best land, and that is hard to navigate. But I just think we have to keep that in mind for the developer and the people that want to buy homes. And I agree with you. I mean, we would love to preserve the best land, but when you look at a 100-acre tract and 10 acres of it's in the floodplain and the rest of it's unbuildable, it is a hard thing to navigate. But I do want to be mindful of it, but it's just something I don't think we can just come out and say, we can't allow them to build on the best land. And maybe we can get it to where they kind of use, both, but just something to think about. And I know we'll talk about it.
Kelly, ever since COVID and when the grocery stores started going empty, there has been a push from Washington down to keep that farmable land farmable. And it's come Washington, Frankfurt, now us. So we need to push it. And as you say, sometimes you can't. But we need to push as much of it as possible.
And I don't disagree with that. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just trying to be like, where's in the middle, because we do have a housing shortage, and as the county's looking to grow, it's like, how do we do this? And
but at the same time, I think we're really trying to find balance. I mean, if we just continue on down the road to the 5-acre tract, we're not being responsive to the concern, I think.
And that's my comment too, Judge. I think you just made the right comment. It's took a lot of time to get to this point. Everybody's working together, and that's what we should do as a community, is work together. In the fastest growing county in the state, we're all working together to try to preserve this farmland. But at the same point, I don't think we're looking at the right thing, because we're still not doing nothing with the 5-acre tracts. What's going to make somebody do this cluster and not do 5-acre tracts? And I think that's where we need to get to, is we've got to slow down the 5-acre tracts.
And the hope is that the cluster might
Well, I think that's what we had
provide
hoped.
options where people don't necessarily want 5 acres.
Yeah.
They want little space. They want to be out of town in a 2 acre, whatever it is. That this cluster is an option and a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah, and I think that's what we had intended when we did this back in 2007. We was hoping that that would push more people to do the clusters, but evidently it didn't. I hope this one would, but there's no guarantee on that either. But we're still not addressing the fact that we're still selling 5-acre tracts every day down the road.
Yeah, it ain't feeling limited.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, our two main points really we want to make, because the septic system is a total nuisance, that's also that's up, is we have to keep, we don't want to lose the 10%, the 60%, which is what we have in the old, 50% on the new. So we're instituting an ordinance that causes a loss of farmland over what we currently have in the books, even though words were used that it simply doesn't pencil. We can make it pencil better by densities. And the other thing is, we must not divide that reserve tract. We're into the thoughts of production ag. So we're into hay, we're into livestock, we're into grains, we're into produce, whatever. And simply providing the developer or whomever, the landowner, another housing unit is not our interest. Our interest is contiguous land, usable land, large tract, because removing the word 5 acres, the biggest problem we have in this county is small lot division. It can be 6 acres, 10 acres, whatever. It's still separated out. And if you have 10 acres, you can divide it again. You know, we're still losing land. That's our problem. In the back of the letter we provided, we cited Bourbon County's option on the 5-acre tracts. And, you know, so therefore, there's already a precedent set for it being used, where it's a delayed sale tactic on 5 acres. We maybe could do something about that, but you're 100% right. The biggest problem mathematically is small lot division, 5-acre tracts. So that's another fight.
So I will end this conversation, if it's okay, and then we'll, on the 18th of June at 4:30, we're going to do a Liberty Tree. What would be wrong if coming here at 6 o'clock and taking any public comment? Just having anybody have any objections to that?
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. When's your next planning commission meeting?
Next Thursday.
I'm sorry, so that's too,
Not the same day.
Too late.
is that too soon? Or is it, I mean, what if we came on the 11th? I mean, that's another option, I guess, just to take public comment on the 11th at 4:30.
Cam, if we put language in here about, conservation district, whatever, does that have to go back to the planning commission or no? What's your?
Not sure. I mean, I'd take Holden's point, and he may be right, but I'll have to chew on that a little bit. I think what you do is you do a first reading with what's been recommended. You hear the public comment, I guess, prior to that first reading, and then any amendments could potentially be considered between the first and second. I think that's what we did with a similar, I guess the RV park deal. Hopefully that'll be as painless as possible.
I think if we did
I think if you get, it just depends on how far off, I don't want to say off track, but how far you're deviating with what's been recommended once we get into that amendment process.
So if we come back on the 11th at 4:30, that gives us time. And this is not like, it doesn't
You're
have,
saying doing a public comment?
just having a workshop for public comment. And we'd put it on social media and share it on social media and say we're having just a special call, no action taken, just a workshop for public comment.
You don't think it'll run into their meeting at 6?
We tell them we have to quit at 5:30.
I mean, an hour. It's good to put a cap on stuff, man.
I think an hour's enough.
Yeah.
I mean, the soil
Give me a
conservation-
chance to read this.
And it gives us a chance to read that in depth and then go from there.
Go over everything.
Is that doable?
I'm fine.
All right. Thank you all. That leads us to one other item, and I'll defer to Chad Wallace on this, but the conversation of an ordinance that would restrict through traffic for trucks on smaller county roads, and the enforcement piece of this is very challenging, but I think what, Chad, and I'll let you speak for yourself, I think your goal is just a deterrent.
Yeah. So, what I have experienced in my district is with the problems on I-64, I'm seeing more and more semi-traffic getting off on Midway Road and coming across Cane Run, Craig Lane, Swords Road. And I can't speak to Ironworks and 460 because they're state roads, but when we have that semi-traffic coming across that roads, it is becoming issues for people who are just general traffic, and this is no way to deter farm traffic or construction. It's the semi trucks that are coming on roads that they have no business being on. And when I talked with JR about it, JR did some research, and because I thought we could just put up no semi trucks or no through semi trucks. And he said that we're going to have to go get an ordinance in place to put such signage. I'm not trying to criminally prosecute people. I'm just trying to keep people from getting in trouble on certain roads. And it can be for different reasons. And I think that's what we need to look at the metric. It could be for the width of the road. It could be for turn radius. It could be underpass. It could be for a railroad crossing. Or it could be, we know that if you go on Cane Run, there are 3 sharp turns there. If you go down with Mark Sutton on Robinson Lane, you go toward the creek past Chuck Tackett's, there's a sharp turn. A semi-truck has no business being on that road. So that's kind of what my discussion would be, Cam, and I'm going to kind of lean on you. And this all was really triggered this week on Tuesday. We had a semi-truck going down Swords Road, turning left onto 460, going west to Frankfort, and try to make that turn, and it got its back wheels caught in the culvert. Traffic was stopped, and we've had 2 semi-trucks in 10 years flip over there. And I just want to keep them off Swords Road so they don't get themselves in that spot. So, Cam, I'm kind of looking to maybe create an ordinance with some triggers on there that says we can post signage for certain roads, not state roads, just county roads. And so I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, I think I sent an email yesterday and briefly did some research. I think you can do that under the statute. Place restrictions on like weights of vehicles or speed restrictions on certain county roads if you can justify it based on either deterioration of the roadways or safety or things like that. So I don't know if you have in mind, Chad, like specifically, like we draft an ordinance and we list the roads that we're talking about. That may be the simplest way to do it. We might want to try to, and JR, I don't know if you know if there's other counties that have have done this, and so we're not reinventing the wheel, so we can look at examples. I was trying to kind of find some, yesterday. I hadn't found anything yet much, but I think it can be done. So we can draft something.
We could do it that way, or maybe we could. I'm going to defer to JR. I have in my mind, I think what roads they should go down.
Yeah.
But it really needs to be left up to him since he's the road department director. One other thing I forgot. I don't know if since we're looking at this, I don't know if we start getting into bridge, like certain bridges that semi-trucks should not go down on county roads. But I'm just trying to think of all the triggers that that would say, hey, we don't need to allow semi-truck traffic.
So either you draft an ordinance that describes what those triggers are.
Yeah.
And whatever those are, or you list the specific roads and bridges. That would be, in my mind, the 2 ways to do it.
Let's try to agree to do a little additional research, share any drafts of existing ordinance that a county might have, and then look at having further discussion on that, and then seeing what the pleasure of the court is from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Absolutely.
I assume it would carve out if you had a legitimate business purpose for a large truck on a road.
Yeah, and there may be some statutory exceptions anyway that you might not be able to get around.
Like if you have machinery being hauled to a site, right, that has to go down Swords Road, right? You don't want them not to be able to go down Swords Road because they're doing something for a homeowner there.
Right.
So
Or road construction.
or road construction, or,
Weight limit's still, in my mind, an issue, because I brought this up about 10 years ago, but I passed a semi truck going down a small road, and the weight limit on the bridge, and I was like, I know it's way over the weight. But then the enforcement part, when I brought it up, they're like, somebody's gotta be right there at the time to see it.
But your goal is more than.
I just don't want them turning on certain roads, just stay on,
Sounds like
hopefully,
yours,
the
what I'm hearing
state
from you is
roads.
safety.
But even the state roads, you get on ironworks with a semi truck, it's a little dicey.
Yeah, state roads, I
as well.
think, you'd have to get with the state.
I was gonna say, I seen a semi on Ironworks or that car hauler on Ironworks. It was
Yes, sir.
tight.
Sets the weight limit on all of our county bridges. I mean, we don't set that weight limit, the state sets. They come in and inspect all of our bridges every 3 years, and send us inspection reports that needs to be done, and they set the weight limits, the state does,
So
on all
could we-
county roads.
Could you put like a sign in possibly like no semi trucks or at the beginning of the road, it's got a weight limit at like, cause there's no way for them trucks to turn around. If they get to that bridge and they didn't know, it's,
That's it.
Too late.
If we pass this ordinance, yes, we can, it gives us a little.
But
Yeah.
can I ask this question with the signage we put down towards Sadieville? Has that made any difference down there? You know, the signage the state put up to.
Where at?
Down Sadieville, going into Sadieville.
Yeah. I think it's helped some, but no, it hadn't stopped it. I mean, I was just looking at an email that I got from the mayor, Mayor Halsey. Actually, I'll share that with the court. They're actually doing something in Campbell County with state roads via this email that I'm just glancing back through. Because that issue in Sadieville is a state road. It runs through from Scott County into Harrison County. It's it's 32, State Route 32. I'll share this email, and there's a little information here about what Campbell County Fiscal Court's doing on state highways up there, because they're having similar problems on some smaller state roads with a lot of big truck traffic, like Sadieville's having. Because they're actually, talked to the mayor just a couple of weeks ago, they actually have tractor and trailers get hung up in the tunnel that's going under, and that stops any emergency vehicles from getting through, because it's time consuming to get those folks unhung, from what I've been told.
And
So
if you haven't seen those signs, they're not little signs. They're huge
Yeah,
signs.
they are.
These guys got to see them when they go up
But
that road.
you know,
They
you
still
all-
go anyway.
you got to remember, they're not reading those signs. They're looking at their GPS.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Debbie?
Well, oddly enough, the same day the semi-office I was on 460 after that, and somebody had sent a wide load down 460 in Franklin County, where it curves, and there's also guardrails. Well, you know what happened? It jammed up, and cars were backed up for miles, so that's a.
I passed that wide load the
See,
same
now,
day.
what the heck was that all about?
I don't know, but that was,
I mean, you know, so
you had to get off the road.
There's no way.
I'll share this with the court, Judge. And
Well, we got plenty of work to do.
Yeah.
With that said, then, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and then if anybody else wants to bring something up, but Planning Commission, their building needs a new flat roof. And there's 3 existing quotes. JR's reviewed those, and I've reviewed them. I'm going to send out an email to you all. The one quote that we think's best, we'll share that with you in the details about the mill of the membrane, the TP membrane and such, but
Is this on the back part or the front?
the back part.
The back part of the building is right, really where the damage is right where those two seams come together. It's the old part of the building and the new part.
But I do not believe that funds were in the budget earmarked for a roof, so we'll have to juggle it, but.
It's split with the city, right?
I believe that's the way it's written up.
Yeah.
But please, and I'll make sure they know what we're doing, but please know that it needs to be done. It's not an option, and we'll send out an email sharing that information.
And Mark and I have got a problem. We've got one that's leaking, and it's rotting. So I'll pass that one to you now, give you a fair warning.
Well, you shared the details, and JR is gonna go by and,
He takes care of everything.
yeah. So, So she had already she's ahead of you.
Yeah, well, she could probably contact you, same time she contacted me.
Yeah. Well, with that said then, this meeting is adjourned.
Judge, I just.